Hey, time for another stand up. We are going to continue our discussion today on Microsoft's digital defense uh, report from 2023. We're going to look at some of the key metrics that Microsoft calls out in this report. And let's dive into that for today. So, Yuri, do you want to get us started? What are some of these numbers that we're looking at? Help us understand.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Do you want to go ahead and share the screen? We'll show our viewers the Microsoft Digital Defense Report 2023. And, this report is monumental. If we look, Microsoft is able to synthesize 65 trillion signals daily, right? That's a phenomenal amount of data. And that's over 750 billion signals per second, right? And they get all this data from endpoints, from cloud architectures, from Active Directory environments, from all their customers. And frankly, I'm unaware of any government agency or any private entity that can collect this many signals, right? So just a monumental amount of data. They also tracked 300 threat actors, right? And this includes 160 nation state actors, right? So you have your countries that are on the offensive, right? You have your China, you have your Iran, you have your Russia, and they're tracking all these nation state actors that attack private companies. They're also tracking 50 ransomware groups that consistently, attempt to ransom a lot of these smaller organizations and larger organizations as well. They're also receiving this data from 135 million managed devices. Right. And when I think about that, those are actual endpoints or servers that are feeding all of this very valuable telemetry to Microsoft. And so they have a very unique vantage point when reporting on some of the threats that they see out there. One of the figures that actually surprised me was 4,000 identity attacks per second. I thought it would be more. With things like credential stuffing, I thought we would see a lot more attacks per second. But then Microsoft has their own controls that limit, how many attacks can occur per second. So again, a lot of data in this report. And over the coming days, we're going to be sharing some of the key findings. But we just wanted to show you the metrics that are in this report. Again, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, we would encourage you to either read the entire report, which is over 130 pages, or you can download the executive summary and digest it in a much quicker fashion. So a couple other things we wanted to point out were, Microsoft says that cyber criminals are leveraging the cybercrime as a service ecosystem to launch phishing attacks, distributed denial of service attacks, and identity attacks of scale. And some of the additional key findings that were very interesting were that 80 to 90% of all successful ransomware compromises originate through unmanaged devices. So when we think about things like bring your own devices, oftentimes ransomware groups will use those unmanaged devices that organizations have no control over to launch ransomware campaigns. And out of those 80 to 90% of successful ransomware compromises, some of the initial attack vectors were external remote services. So things like remote desktop protocol and VPN access, valid accounts. So most frequently, they called out the use of Citrix credentials and also public-facing applications. And out of those, ransomware compromises, human-operated ransomware attacks were up more than 200% compared to the previous year, because there was some chatter in the security industry last year. Well, have we kind of hit the peak of ransomware campaigns? And that this year, the report just shows that ransomware campaigns are alive and well, and they're still being used by bad actors. Another key metric that I found very interesting was that 70% of organizations encountering human-operated ransomware had fewer than 500 employees, right? I hear this often that, companies will say, hey, we're just a small fish, no one cares about us, we're not well known, we're not public in that sense. But the data shows otherwise, right? The data shows that a lot of these bad actors, a lot of these nation states are going after the smaller companies, and that the smaller organizations need to have the proper protections in place to make sure they're mitigating a lot of these threats. Any thoughts on any of those statistics so far, Brian?
Yeah, the numbers are pretty crazy for me. Sitting on the edge of cybersecurity and not being like inundated day to day with what's happening in that space. Like the idea of 65 trillion signals, like it just seems massive. And I mean, I get it. Microsoft is a big company. They've got a lot of opportunities to catch signals, but it seems like the value that they can create, that they do create with this report based off of the information that they have, phenomenal use of some of their capabilities, and it's nice of them. I know they're not doing it just to be nice, but it's great that they take that and put that together in a way that we can all benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. So talking a little bit more about ransomware, one of the key findings was also that ransomware operators will first exfiltrate data right before they ransom an organization, and the reason they do that is to add pressure to their ransomware demands, right? If an organization is purely encrypted, right, and all of their data is locked up, that's one thing. But when a ransomware group can say, hey, we've already got your data, so even if you can restore from backups, well, guess what? We're going to publish some of that data on the dark web. And certainly many organizations have compliance requirements or reporting requirements. And, oftentimes they'll pay the ransom. As bad as that sounds, right? And it goes against the advice of the government. But I think there was a recent incident where the Caesars organization in Las Vegas, I think they paid a $13 million ransom because organizations don't want their customers' data published on the dark web. Any thoughts there, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that in Vegas. Caesars paid, MGM didn't, right?
Right.
And it's I get it. It's a tricky situation, and in the name of trying to preserve customer data, I could see sometimes a business saying, "Hey, let's just pay." Although the challenge I also have with that is just because you pay doesn't guarantee that the people are going to do what they said, right? So I don't know how you guarantee that they don't leak your data if that's their threat. I don't know how. Maybe you've got some thoughts on that, but how do you prevent, if I steal your data and I say, hey, pay me $10 million or I'm going to release your data, and you pay me, how do you guarantee I don't release it anyway?
Yeah, that's a great point. So a lot of these threat actor groups, they actually try and provide good customer service, right? I think a couple of years ago, there was even a forum, reviewing these ransomware groups, and a customer responded, 5 stars. I received my data. I received the encryption keys as promised, right? But I think so a lot of these ransomware groups, they want to have, quote, a good name out there in the sense that they actually restore your data. But the problem is that these ransomware groups are, they're also, they could also be attacked by other ransomware groups, right? So what would prevent another ransomware group attacking, someone who's attacked you and then exfiltrating your data, right? So kind of double attack type of scenario. So, but also going back to paying the ransom, right? You need to have this discussion with your senior decision makers well in advance of an attack happening, right? Because you don't want to be on, on game day, if you will. You don't want to be trying to make these decisions and figuring out, well, should we pay the ransom? Should we not? You have to sit down and have that very important conversation with senior decision makers well in advance.
Yeah, makes sense.
Couple other things that we thought were very interesting was that 78% of IoT devices on customer networks have known vulnerabilities. And these are, things like HVAC devices. Traditionally is not thought of as potentially needing to be secured, right? And 78% of those devices, 46% of the 78 cannot even be patched. So, when you're thinking about how do you secure your environment, you have to remember that those devices are on your network and they also need to be segmented. They need to have proper controls. If you can't patch them, you have to segment them into their own VLAN, if you will, because they are vulnerable and they have been used to launch attacks. And the last thing, that we thought was interesting was that 17% of intrusions involved known remote monitoring and management tools. So these are tools that traditionally MSPs, managed service providers, will use for businesses to monitor things like CPU usage, hard disk space, right? And oftentimes the MSPs themselves will be compromised. There was a Kaseya supply chain attack a couple of years ago. And so the MSP will be compromised, and that will then allow all their customers to be compromised as well. So just something important to consider if you are using an MSP. That's a discussion you need to have with them is, hey, what kind of security are you using? Is our tenant segmented from all your other tenants? What is your access control policy, et cetera? So it's very important to interview your MSPs or MSSPs even to get a better understanding of their security posture.
Nice.
Yeah. So those are the kind of key insights. Anything else you'd like to add, Brian?
So what are we ending with today as far as our focused action? What are we doing today to improve our security?
The thing you're doing today is getting ready for tomorrow's stand-up, because those are the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the 5 key areas to mitigate 99% of these attacks. So that's number 1. Number 2, again, if you haven't had a chance to read the report, definitely download it. Talk to your execs about it and get this on their radar.
All right. And that'll do it then.
Thanks, Brian.
Good stuff. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.